They say the universe has a sense of humor. What they don't tell you is that it's a particularly twisted one. When the Scary delegation materialized in the middle of the Pentagon's most secure conference room at 0600 hours on a Tuesday morning, I was just trying to enjoy my coffee and donuts before the morning briefing. The brass spilled their coffee. Security drew weapons. I just sat there, jelly donut halfway to my mouth, watching 6-foot-tall crystalline beings shimmer into existence. "We require the human designated as intelligence analyst Elliot Reed," announced the tallest crystal, its voice somehow both melodic and mechanical. Every head turned toward me. My donut slipped from my fingers. "That's me," I said, feeling suddenly underdressed for first contact in my rumpled uniform. "And you are?" "We are the Scary consensus." "You have been drafted." I snorted. "I'm already in the military." "That's how drafts work. One and done." "Not by your species," replied the crystal being. "By the Galactic Council. The war requires your assistance." And that's how, within 4 hours, I found myself aboard an alien vessel hurtling through a dimensional fold, headed toward what they called the front, which wasn't a place so much as a concept. Turned out, war in space isn't about trenches and territory. It's about probability, causality, and mathematical inevitability. The Scary explained that they'd been locked in conflict with the Voth ascendancy for over 300 years. Both species had evolved beyond physical combat, their battles were computational, algorithmic. They fought by predicting each other's strategies, deploying countermeasures before attacks even launched. It was like a cosmic chess game where both sides could see 30 moves ahead. "So why me?" I asked the Scary ambassador, 9TL, as we observed a holographic battle simulation that resembled abstract art more than warfare. "I'm not exactly Stephen Hawking. I analyze terrorist chatter and troop movements, not, whatever this is." "That is precisely why," 9TL replied. "Your species possesses something we call productive irrationality." Is that a polite way of saying humans are crazy? It is a recognition that your neural pathways allow for what we consider mathematical errors but result in unpredictable creative solutions. Your species makes cognitive leaps that are, by our standards, unjustifiable. Yet they often work. By the time we reached the front, a vast sector of space where reality itself seemed thinner, more malleable, I'd been briefed on the stakes. The Voth were expanding their territory using a technology that essentially rewrote the laws of physics in their favor. If they won, countless inhabited systems would suddenly find themselves existing in a universe where their biology couldn't function. The Scary brought me to their war council, 15 crystalline beings arranged in a perfect circle around a churning holographic display. They'd been running simulations for decades, each ending in stalemate or marginal victories quickly reversed. "Our predictive models show a 99.87% probability of eventual defeat," stated the council elder, a Scary whose crystal form had facets that resembled age lines. "We have exhausted all rational strategies." "Which is why you went looking for irrational help," I said, understanding dawning. "But why me specifically?" "There are smarter humans, more qualified. We analyzed all candidates. Your pattern recognition abilities combined with your particular neurological architecture and what your psychological profile calls smart-ass tendencies make you uniquely suited." I couldn't help but laugh. "You traveled across the galaxy because I'm good at my job and have a bad attitude?" "Precisely," said 9TL. They showed me the battle plans they'd been using, complex mathematical formulations that made quantum physics look like kindergarten arithmetic. The problem became clear: both sides had been fighting using perfect logic, which meant both sides could predict each other's moves with near-perfect accuracy. "You're too smart," I said. "You've optimized yourselves into a corner." The Scary equivalent of confused silence followed. "Your strategies are so perfect that they're perfectly predictable," I explained. "You need to introduce what we call controlled chaos, just enough randomness to break the pattern without completely destroying your strategic advantage." I spent the next hour trying to explain the concept of a wild card to beings who had evolved beyond gambling. The breakthrough came when I put it in terms they understood, mathematical perturbation theory. You're inserting a variable that can't be easily factored into their equations, I said. Me. The Scari War Council deliberated for precisely 3.8 minutes, an eternity in their time scale, before unanimously agreeing to turn command over to me. You understand, said the elder, that you will be responsible for the continued existence of 1,742 sentient species across this galactic sector. No pressure, I muttered. As they integrated me into their command system, a direct neural interface that felt like suddenly gaining an extra sense, I caught my first glimpse of our enemy. The Voth weren't physically imposing, they resembled elegant, floating mantises with too many eyes. But their minds were vast, cold, and calculating. They have detected your presence, 9TL informed me. They are attempting to predict your strategy. I smiled for the first time since this insanity began. Good luck with that. I don't even know what my strategy is yet. And that was the honest truth. I was making this up as I went along, relying on instinct built from years of analyzing human conflicts, messy, emotional, often irrational affairs that defied the clean mathematics of Scari warfare. What I did know was that in any conflict, understanding your enemy's assumptions was the key to victory. And the Voth had one massive assumption, that war could be reduced to equations. Time to prove them wrong. The Scari Command Center was a crystalline cathedral of light and information. Holographic displays pulsed with data streams that would make NASA supercomputers look like pocket calculators. I stood in the center of it all, my human brain barely processing the sensory overload. Our adversaries have deployed 17 contingency algorithms in response to your integration, reported 9TL. They are systematically evaluating all possible human strategic doctrines from your military history. I laughed. Let them. That's exactly what I'm counting on. My plan wasn't fancy. In fact, it was almost embarrassingly simple. I would make the Voth think they understood humans when they didn't. I would let them believe they had accounted for our unpredictability while deliberately playing into that expectation. We need to transmit our attack vectors, I told the Scari Council. But I want them partially corrupted. The Elder's crystalline structure flickered, their version of confusion. Deliberate transmission errors would be immediately detected and corrected. Not if they're the right kind of errors, I replied. Not if they look exactly like the kind of mistakes a human would make. Over the next hour, I crafted what might be the strangest battle plan in galactic history. We would transmit strategic data in ways that mimicked human cognitive biases, availability heuristics, confirmation bias, the tendency to see patterns where none exist. The Voth would receive what looked like clumsy attempts to hide our true intentions, while our actual strategy remained invisible precisely because it was so obvious. You're creating a double bluff, 9TL observed, finally understanding. But with mathematical rather than psychological deception. Triple bluff, actually, I corrected. They'll think they've seen through our deception to our real plan, but that revelation is itself the deception. The Scari deployed my strategy with precision that was almost poetic. We transmitted battle algorithms that contained deliberate flaws, the exact kinds of flaws the Voth would expect from inferior human thinking. Meanwhile, we were plotting a much simpler approach. The Voth are responding, announced a Scari tactical officer. They are redirecting 87% of their computational resources to counter what they believe is our true strategy. I nodded. And the other 13%? Maintaining their standard defensive protocols. Perfect. That's our target. The Scari Council shifted uncomfortably. Your plan targets only a minor portion of their defenses. Trust me, I said, channeling every cocky protagonist from every war movie ever made. Sometimes the best way through a wall is through the door. I couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of it all. Humanity had spent millennia dreaming about our place in the cosmos, imagining heroic space battles with laser beams and starfighters. Yet here I was, fighting an interstellar war with game theory and psychological manipulation. No explosions. No dramatic speeches. Just algorithms and counter-algorithms in the silent vacuum of space. Well, mostly silent. They've detected an anomaly in our transmission pattern, 9TL warned. They're probing our secondary firewall. Let them in, I said. That would expose our auxiliary command functions. Exactly. Let them think they've found our weakness. The ethical implications weren't lost on me. I was manipulating an entire species, potentially condemning them to defeat. But from what I'd gathered, the Voth's victory would mean subjugation or extinction for countless other civilizations, including potentially Earth somewhere down the line. The Voth fleet is repositioning, reported the tactical officer. They appear to be concentrating forces against our perceived vulnerability. What the Voth couldn't realize, was that humans had an evolutionary advantage they couldn't match. We were used to being wrong. We made mistakes constantly and had developed entire civilizations around compensating for those mistakes. The Skari and Voth, with their perfect logic, had never needed to develop such adaptations. Now, I said quietly. The Skari executed the final phase of my plan. We didn't attack the Voth fleet or their command structure. We didn't target their weapons or shields. Instead, we introduced a simple but devastating element into their predictive algorithms, humor. More specifically, we transmitted a modified version of the mathematical paradox known as the liar's paradox, integrated with elements of human comedic timing. To the Voth's hyperlogical minds, it was like introducing a virus, one that didn't destroy their systems but instead created tiny moments of computational uncertainty. Moments where their perfect predictions faltered. Their response times are increasing, 9TL observed. Cognitive processing appears to be looping. What followed wasn't a battle in any traditional sense. There were no explosions, no casualties. Instead, the Voth computational network began experiencing cascading failures of logic, each small uncertainty creating ripples that amplified through their decision trees. They're attempting to purge the paradox, the elder noted. But it has already spread through their predictive matrices. I watched the holographic display as the Voth fleet's formations began to shift erratically. They weren't being destroyed, they were being confused. For beings that had evolved to rely entirely on perfect prediction, uncertainty was more devastating than any weapon. 1 hour and 47 minutes after we implemented my strategy, the Voth command sent a communication request. The face that appeared in the holographic display was beautiful in its alien way, insectoid features arranged with perfect symmetry, multifaceted eyes that seemed to contain universes. You have introduced an unsolvable variable, stated the Voth commander, its voice a melodious hum. Our models cannot account for it. That's kind of the point, I replied. We wish to understand. And that was the moment I realized what victory actually looked like. Not surrender. Not destruction. Understanding. You can't quantify everything, I explained. Some things, like humor, like love, like the weird human ability to make decisions we know are bad, they exist outside perfect prediction. The Voth commander was silent for a long moment. This is inefficient. Wildly, I agreed. But it's also beautiful. It's what creates art and music and scientific breakthroughs. Sometimes you need to be wrong in interesting ways to discover something new. Another long pause. Then, we will withdraw from contested territories to consider these inefficiencies. When the transmission ended, the Skari command center erupted in their version of celebration, their crystalline bodies vibrating at frequencies that created harmonies so perfect they made my teeth ache. You have achieved in 2 hours what we could not accomplish in 3 centuries, the elder said. The Galactic Council will be eternally grateful. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt strangely melancholy. I didn't actually beat them, you know. I just showed them a different way of thinking. Is that not the most profound victory possible? Asked 9TL. Maybe it was. In all our human stories about alien wars, we always imagined that our courage or determination or love would save us. No one ever considered that our most valuable trait might be our imperfection, our glorious, frustrating, wildly inefficient humanity. As the Scari prepared to return me to Earth, I gazed out at the stars through a viewport. Somewhere out there, an ancient, hyperlogical species was trying to understand jokes. The universe did have a sense of humor after all. By the way, I said to 9TL as we prepared for the journey home, when you selected me for this mission, you mentioned my smart-ass tendencies were part of the criteria. Did you actually use that term? 9TL's crystalline form shimmered in what I'd come to recognize as their version of amusement. We may have spent more time studying humans than you realize. I laughed. Well, I guess that means humanity's collective attitude problem just saved the galaxy. Wait until I put that on my performance review. 2 hours to win an interstellar war. Not bad for a Tuesday. I just hoped they'd let me finish my donut when I got back. 6 months after returning to Earth, I was back at my desk in the Pentagon, analyzing chatter that suddenly seemed trivial compared to intergalactic warfare. Nobody believed my abducted by aliens story, of course. My superiors had written it off as a stress-induced breakdown, and I was just starting to think I'd hallucinated the whole thing. Then my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, "Look outside." Standing in the parking lot was 9TL, somehow reconfigured to appear almost human, like a tall person made entirely of slightly too perfect glass. Elliot Reed, 9TL greeted me. "The Galactic Council requests your presence again." "Let me guess," I sighed, already reaching for my jacket. "Another impossible war?" "Actually, no. The Voth have proposed an interspecies cultural exchange. They wish to understand humor, and have specifically requested you as their instructor." I nearly choked. "You want me to teach an advanced alien civilization how to tell jokes? Is this not the logical next step in peaceful relations?" "It's about the most illogical thing I've ever heard," I replied, then grinned. "I'm in." As we walked toward 9TL's cloaked shuttle, I was already mentally compiling material. So a human, a Scari, and a Voth walk into a bar. 9TL's crystalline face shimmered. "I believe this is what humans call the beginning of a beautiful friendship." "Wrong movie reference," I said, "but you're learning. The universe, it turns out, doesn't just have a sense of humor. It's also got one hell of a punchline."